So we're going to give just a couple minutes for participants to join. We see that some are coming on board. We'll give another minute or two, and then we'll go ahead and get started. As we're waiting to get started and folks are getting joined, I do want to just add throughout the entire presentation, if you have any questions at any point throughout, you can throw them in the chat or the Q&A. We're checking both, and so we can make sure to get any questions answered that folks have. And so I'll give just another couple of seconds for a couple more people to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. It's great to have everyone here. And just 1 second, we'll get started. Okay, I think we're probably doing pretty well. There might be a couple more people that are joining here over the next couple minutes, but we can go ahead and get started. And so we can go ahead and start. Next slide, please, Josh. Today's speakers, so just want to kind of point out, today it'll be myself and Dr. Kristen Wobbe and Josh Mitchell presenting. And what we're going to be discussing is building a project-based culture on campuses. It's really important as we talk about how do we serve our learners today and how do we make sure that they're prepared for that complicated world, that this isn't just integrating things on top of what we're doing, but how do we really think very intentionally about building these experiences as part of what our learners are going through in their journey and making sure that they are prepared for that world after they complete their college education. And so we'll talk a little bit about what's the landscape that our learners are finding themselves in once they complete their post-secondary studies, how you build those foundations for project-based learning. We'll talk a little bit about Ripen, and then we'll also have questions. Again, do not wait to the end to ask questions. Ask questions at any point throughout in the chat or the Q&A. We're checking both, but then we'll also have a little bit of time at the end for questions as well. And so if we'll go to the next slide, please. So I want to start out with a little bit of here's what's going on right now in our world. And anyone who's heard me present before knows that I talk about this a lot because this is really meaningful to me. And it's really important that we understand the journey of our learners, what they're facing, not only in their post-secondary experience, but after their post-secondary experience. And so right now, what we know is we have a very diverse student body attending all of our institutions. And those students, the vast majority of them are coming to college to help further their workforce outcomes. That doesn't mean they're coming to college for a job. That means they're coming to college because they want to be able to provide for themselves and their families, which will then allow them to be able to give more to their communities, be able to serve more in their lives, and be able to navigate that complicated world because those basic needs are met through their employment. What we also know is that we actually see significant underemployment rates with some of our students. Right now, about 52% of college graduates are underemployed. We also know that if you start out college underemployed, you're more likely to be underemployed 10 years later. When you also break down that data and disaggregate it, we can see that there are certain populations that are more likely to be underemployed than others. And so it's really important that we think of that college experience and we create college experiences that really allow our learners to access those experiences. So every learner is able to gain that experiential learning or those opportunities that really help them be successful post-college. And so why do we believe in project-based learning? That's clearly Ripen. Josh will talk a little bit more about it, but Ripen's mission is to eliminate underemployment. We believe the way that we do that is through ensuring students have access to project-based learning with authentic employers. What the data is showing us, and this report from Strata also highlights, is that the estimated effects of project-based learning during the college experience for a learner is they're more likely to make 20,000, just under 20,000 more a year because of that project-based learning and the connections and the skill development they were able to get during their post-secondary experience. They also are more likely to find that their college experience was beneficial to them and provided value, which we are in a society right now that questions that value of post-secondary education. And so it's really important that we're able to meet our learners where they are and help support them in those future goals and what's going to help them really be able to pave that future for themselves. What we also know about this experiential learning, it's important. It helps set students up for success. It really gives them the skills, builds social capital. What we also know is there's nowhere near enough. And so there right now, what the Business Higher Education Forum found is that there's over 8 million learners that wanted access to an internship in 2024. Not even half of them were able to secure it. And so that's a really important point that we like to make, is that there aren't enough to start with. But even if there were, a lot of internships aren't structured in a way that allow for learners to be able to participate. And so that's where we fit into that larger model of experiential learning, where when you think about your learners, they have many different paths, and experiential learning programs on college campuses need to really support all of those different paths. And so it's not a one and done, but a many, many different types of opportunities. And we'll talk a little bit more about our model of experiential learning and how that fits into the larger umbrella of what an experiential learning program on a campus can look like. We're in a world that is full of AI. And so what kind of discussion would we have if we did not include some AI data and statistics about what's going on? I'm going to start out by saying we have some early things we're seeing about AI from AI, but nobody knows what AI is going to do in the long term. And so this is kind of like us almost trying to anticipate where the puck is going and trying to figure out how in higher education we respond to this incredibly new world of AI. We respond to what is happening in the job market due to AI, but then we also kind of try to look a little bit forward on those crystal balls that we all know we have. And we all try to figure out, okay, how do we best develop our students who are going to be shaping that world tomorrow and shaping the use of and the development of AI? And so as we talk about underemployment rates of college grads sitting around that 50%, that was all before really the addition of AI into our world. And so we don't fully know how much AI is going to disrupt what entry-level jobs look like into the future. But this report right here gives a little bit of an early insight of those usually what are considered entry-level roles and jobs and tasks. We'll say tasks. A lot of that can be augmented, or a lot of it can be actually automated by AI. So what does that mean for entry-level roles? What do they look like in the future? What are the new skills that learners will need to have at the point they graduate college so they're prepared for those roles that they're going to be looking for in the future? Personally, I kind of think what we consider mid-level roles now are going to become the new entry level. That's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen. And so now our learners have to be prepared for mid-level roles, what are considered mid-level roles today, which is why that imperative for experiential learning in college becomes even more important. So our students can graduate college and go on and be able to find roles that fit what they've learned in that college experience. And so this one is a little bit scary to me. And there's actually a couple of reports out there that break this down a little bit more. This one kind of hit a few weeks ago and has had a lot of people talking. But this report by the Burning Glass Institute finds, if you look at all of those little bar charts, the first one you see, that is the unemployment rate, and it's going up. All of the other ones, it's either stagnant or going down. That is actually the unemployment rate for bachelor's degree holders from 2016 to 2025, which means the unemployment rate for bachelor's degree holders is increasing. That was not necessarily due to AI. That trend started before AI, but how does AI impact this? And what does this mean for the learners that we're trying to prepare for that world that they're moving out into after their post-secondary experience? And so there's a lot of questions we have there about what does that look like? What do we do? How do we prepare them? And why this is really important. And so this to me is also very important, is we can talk about the data all day long. Numbers are numbers, that's great. But numbers don't tell the story of what's actually happening. We don't know what this looks like in the lives of our learners until we actually hear from them. And so I wanted to make sure, I'm not reading these, but they're going to be up for a couple minutes so that way you can read them. What I want to make sure is that we're still getting in touch with the students that we're affecting every day and how their lives are being affected by this weird, shifting, changing job market, plus also the work that they're doing in their post-secondary experience. And these stories highlight different ways that our learners are being affected. Some of them are actually learning to have more empathy for others, or more understanding for others, or more of what we're going to call those human skills. Some of our students are actually understanding a little bit more of the impact they can create in their communities through experiential learning that they're able to do. And so it's just really great to be able to see this is what this means for our learners. And so it's important that we hear their stories and their voices as well. And I'll throw out there that I'm really passionate about this and this human connection, especially in the world of AI. So for anyone who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect. I post about this pretty frequently. I would love to have different folks bring ideas to me as well and different discussions. And so I look forward to being able to continue discussions with folks just around what does this world look like for our learners? What should it look like? What does it mean? How is AI impacting or not impacting? And ultimately, how do we make sure we keep our learners in touch with the most important skills needed for the future? And that is the human-centric skills. And so I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Dr. Chris Wobbe, who is from the Worcester Polytechnic Institute. She actually runs the Center for Project-Based Learning. She's an expert known across the country for the work that she does, really working with faculty and doing project-based learning in the classroom extremely well. So I'll kick it over to Dr. Wobbe. And again, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and throw them in either the Q&A or the chat, and we'll make sure to get them answered.
Thank you so much, Mara. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you to all of those of you who are participating in the webinar today. I wanted to start by giving you a little bit of background. Worcester Polytechnic Institute adopted project-based learning as a key pedagogy more than 50 years ago. And in the intervening 50 years, we learned a lot about doing project-based learning, developed a broad base of knowledge, developed a variety of strategies, resources that we thought would be really useful to other colleges and universities that were interested in advancing project-based learning on their own campuses. And so about a little more than 10 years ago, we created the Center for Project-Based Learning, whose mission is just that, to support PBL adoption by other higher ed institutions. And in the intervening 10 years, we've worked with over 200 institutions and over 3,000 faculty. And you can see a subset of the institutions we've worked with on the slide. And if you're interested about what the center does, the QR code will take you to our web pages where you can learn a little bit more about us. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is not just lessons we learned at WPI from our own adoption of project-based learning, but what I've also seen on other campuses. So
So
at
Chris,
WPI,
I do have one question that's come in, starting kind of like with that why. Why did WPI decide it was important to build a project-based learning campus? Like what was the reasoning behind it and how did it serve your learners?
that is an awesome segue because that's exactly where we're going next. WPI did it in two parts. And the first part, 50 years ago, a little more than 50 years ago, we recognized that what we were doing was not best serving our students for the world that they were graduating into. That was in the late 60s, early 70s when we came to this realization. And we were seeing declining enrollment. And of course, there was this massive cultural, social turmoil happening, and technology was rapidly advancing. So, circumstances not unlike what we're seeing today, although different, right? And so there was decision we needed to change. And so after a couple of years of committees, endless committees, of course, WPI did a really radical thing and threw out its entire curriculum and rebuilt a curriculum where projects were at the core. There were 3 standalone projects required of all students to graduate. One in the sophomore year that was the capstone to our very extensive humanities and arts requirement. One in the junior year that is very interdisciplinary and frequently students are working with external sponsors, and one in the senior year that is a very extensive capstone project, a 3-course equivalent for students in their majors. And so that's one way you can put project-based learning into your curriculum. You can just decide you're going to do it and make that be you can legislate it, basically. I suspect many of you are not interested in that radical a transformation. And so I'll tell you about the next phase, which is part 2 there. And about 20 years ago, we came to another realization that what we had done back in the early 70s was good, but we hadn't gone quite far enough. We were looking at our results from the National Survey of Student Engagement and saw that our first-year students were showing less engagement than their peers at other institutions and way less engagement than our seniors, who were, of course, at that point involved and had been involved in multiple projects. So that was a problem. The other problem was that we'd been advertising ourselves as a place where students could come to do project work, and students were getting to their first year and feeling like they'd gotten a little bit of a bait and switch because there weren't a whole lot of projects in the first year. So again, we had a clear call to action here. And after a couple of more years of committee work, we developed a course-based project in the first year. And this is an optional course for the students. It's team taught and it's interdisciplinary, focused around a big problem. And that sort of more incremental change is what's been more common at the work I've done at other institutions. So we're going to focus the next a bit on how that happens. So once you've decided that you need to make a change and you've decided to move toward project-based learning, the next step is really faculty recruitment. Who's going to be doing this? And what we have found on our campus, and I have seen on others, is when that recruitment involves an application and selection process, that seems to work the best because at that point you are recruiting faculty who are very interested and they're volunteers basically, and that selection gives it a sort of a little bit of a prestige factor. And I don't know about faculty on your campus, but on ours they're a little competitive, and so that makes it kind of more honorable to be chosen. Once you have them, they're going to need some help to be able to do this well. And so one of the big supports is to give them either time or money or both to be able to do this. In our case, we got some summer support that helped us have the time to be able to develop these new courses. And we were also given professional development on how to do this well. And that can be internal, it can be several organizations run great PD for this, the American Association of Colleges and Universities. We'd offer it, but getting some know-how so that the faculty feel confident that what they're doing is high quality. And you want it to be high quality because low quality projects are no better than standard classroom instruction. So giving them the know-how and the time to plan this well.
And then, Chris, we do have another question here.
Sure.
This was with faculty who applied, who were those early adopters or who are interested. How did you bring along faculty that were skeptical or hesitant about adopting project-based learning? How do they get brought on board as well?
Well, we're going to get to that too, but basically they want to see the evidence. They want to see the proof is in the pudding. So first you have to make the pudding. So you take the faculty who are there with you and eager to join in and do this, get them started. One of the things that can be very helpful along the way, and also is helpful in getting the reluctant adopters in. When we did this on our campus, that first year course, our president at the time was very excited by this new program and took every opportunity at every public event to congratulate the faculty who had agreed to do this new adventure, this thing that was important to our institution. And that high level recognition cost nothing and yet made it very plain both to the folks who were involved and those who weren't that what was happening was valued and important. And that can help persuade people. Then when students are highly engaged in their work, they do really good work. And you're going to see, we gotta go back, go back, Josh. You're going to see really great outcomes early on even, and then make sure you publicize and celebrate those. And then these faculty who are doing this new thing that is not an easy shift, it helps for them to know that they're in community with each other. So helping them build a community of practice, providing them with time, space, and maybe a little bit of incentive, whether that's coffee and donuts or a little stipend to get together, share what's working well, what's not working well, and develop strategies to better support the students in this new kind of learning. And when all of those things happen, when the faculty are feeling well supported, their confidence grows and they're more likely to give really high quality experiences to their students. Okay, next slide.
Dr. Roby, we have another question.
Sure.
Is this applied in all colleges? And the question is specific to including engineering, but I think we can talk about engineering. There's questions about liberal arts, humanities. I would love for you to talk about where have you seen it? Any learnings from the different types of programs that you've seen it in?
So at WPI, project-based learning is widespread in all of our disciplines, and in the institutions I've worked with, I've seen it in pretty much every kind of discipline. And it's not uncommon for people to say, well, I can see how that could work in your discipline, but I'm not sure how it could work in mine. And then to see examples and go, oh, actually, I do see how I can do this. So I think it's really possible. And once you start thinking of what projects could be, there, your creative juices kind of get flowing, and it's kind of fun once you're a little more comfortable with it to think up good projects for your students. Um, does that answer the question, Mara? Do you think got that?
Yeah, could you speak a little bit to specifically this question was around engineering? What kind of what have you seen in engineering schools?
Well, WPI is an engineering school, and all of our engineering students have to do those 3 projects, but we also put projects into courses. And so we have engineering classes, the software engineering class, where the students are building an app for a sponsor. And there are other classes where they're taking what they are doing and designing things for the 3D printers that demonstrate their knowledge. In our capstone project, students are working with industries to solve questions that have been sort of back burner problems for them. There are lots of ways to get engineering students involved in this.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so now once the class is done, it's time to assess, right? To see that how this project-based learning opportunity did uh, did do things for your students or not. And if your faculty have been well supported and have gotten the professional development, you're going to end up with great evaluation results. The students will, because we've seen this over and over and over again, they have increased self-efficacy, and this is perhaps one of the most important findings. Giving them these professional experiences is really important. In our national survey of student engagement, we saw increased engagement of the students. The students report, and we see from other sorts of evaluations that they do have better professional skills like communication, collaboration, problem solving, um, information literacy. The students then in these first year courses were also coming back and reporting to us that they were able to get the very coveted research experiences for undergraduate slots as rising sophomores and high quality internships as rising sophomores. And as you know, these are more frequently given to students who are rising juniors or rising seniors. So the students felt like the doors had been open to them that might not have been otherwise. And then it was always fun to have faculty who had these students after the project-based course come to you and say, I can really tell the students who took your class because they're so much better at. And so that was a real asset. So you'll get great student assessment results. The students clearly benefit, but they're not the only ones. Faculty benefit
Before
in.
you dive into, and maybe this is a segue into diving into the
Okay.
faculty, another question we've got is that student feedback, not necessarily student feedback, but those outcomes that you see from the learners while they're still in the post-secondary journey. How did that sustain momentum with faculty or build the program?
Um, I'll tell you an example from my own experience. So I'm a biochemist, and I put a project into one of my courses, the first in the standard biochem sequence. And the students would go from my class to the next class in the sequence. And after a couple of years, the person who taught the second course in the sequence came to me and said, all right, I have to know what this project is that you're doing in your class, because the students are coming to me and saying, we really like that project that we had in Professor Wobie's class. Could we have a project like that in this class too? The students really enjoy this kind of work and this kind of assessment, and it feels more real to them. In fact, because it is more real, nobody, once they graduate, is going to sit down to a pencil and paper test anymore, being asked what they know, but what can they do with what they know? And that's what the project is asking them to do something with what they have learned. And so the students can be some of your best advocates for introducing projects. But also, faculty can be jealous when they see the kind of work that students will do when they are motivated by a real world project. And they'll look at it and say, I don't know how you got them to do that. I can barely get them to read the chapter that I assigned them to read last night. Well, because they're more engaged and interested in doing a project than in reading your chapter. But if reading your chapter is going to help them do a better job at their project, they'll read the chapter because they want to do a good project. So, so students benefit, faculty benefit. You get better prepared students. When you engage in these new kinds of pedagogies and new experiences, you can use that to write conference papers and go present the work that you're doing and how it has worked for you. And so you benefit through getting some pieces of scholarship and teaching and learning that can be used in promotion and tenure considerations. And the institution as a whole benefits because projects also create stories. When a student group has a positive interaction with an employer or makes a difference for a community organization or changes something on campus, that's a story that can be shared with alumni, with prospective students, with the community. And those are all really important stakeholders for us. And having that kind of positive image to share can only benefit the institution as a whole. So to sum up, next slide, Josh. There are a few essential elements, I think, in having a successful launch of a project-based learning initiative. One, you need to have your clarity of purpose. You need to be explicit about why the shift is needed and why you think moving to project-based learning is a good one. We're going to try and give you some more ammo for that. You need faculty champions, faculty who are engaged and committed to making this happen. You need to support those faculty with professional development, with time, with whatever resources they're going to need. And if you want them to have these real world experiences working with employers, having a platform such as Ripen that can help provide those project experiences can be really helpful. Recognition, reward the time, effort, and scholarly outputs of the faculty and the students involved, and then share that widely. Seeing the amazing things that students can accomplish when they are put to work at something they feel is real and meaningful will also be helpful in convincing your more reluctant faculty to thinking that this is actually something that they should get interested in and go ahead and try. So, any questions at this point, Mara?
Yes, we've got a couple more. And I really like one that's come in because in higher education, I think we all know we like to talk about what went right. We like to talk about those beautiful outcomes that we have. We don't talk as much about the messiness of how we got there. And so I really like this question is, in looking back, are there some decisions that you would have changed in how you built this on your campus? Like what went wrong and how did you guys then work to alleviate that?
So, I think one of the things that we didn't appreciate enough at the beginning was how explicit we would need to be with the students about why we were doing courses this different way. Students arrive on our campus having been pretty successful in their high school days. They've learned how to perform on the memorize the thing, spit it back out on the test kind of assessments. And when you change the rules on them, particularly the very successful ones, they're very reluctant to engage in this new form because they don't know that they're going to be successful at it. So we had to learn over and over and over again to tell them why we were doing this, what we hoped they would gain for it, and then point it out along the way. Because they're used to thinking of knowledge as a series of vocab words that they know, or theorems that they've memorized, or new CAD programs, being able to code things, all of which feel very quantitative. But when they're learning the professional skills, which is absolutely a part of this, and they're learning how to collaborate better, and they're learning how to take initiative, and they're learning how to solve problems, and they're learning how to use information better. To them, that doesn't feel like learning. So helping them recognize the learning that they're doing along the way is something that we learned from having students say, but I don't feel like I'm learning anything. And when we would point out and have them reflect back, that helped them see that they were learning and appreciate this um, as something that was going to be really beneficial to them, even though it felt so radically different than what they had been doing for the most part in high schools.
Can you unpack a little bit more when you mentioned that reflection piece? Can you unpack a little bit more what that looks like or what you've seen it look like, some examples, just to ensure that learners are gaining those skills and they know they are, like what have you done and what have you seen work?
Well, one of the things that we do in that first year class is we ask students that they do a big project that takes up about 7 weeks of a semester. And we have them do progress reports orally along the way to the class. And they're very nervous about giving that first little presentation, as informal as it is. And then when they do their final one at the end, now that they've done it 3 or 4 times, the presentations are so much better. They're so much better. And we have them, we just say, well, how did you feel this time compared to the first time you did it? And they're like, oh yeah, this is much better. I feel much more able to handle this now. So sometimes it's just an in the minute thing. But we've also taken to asking students just to write reflections at the end. And in that course, we have 7 shared learning outcomes across the courses, all of which are on professional skill development. We ask them to pick a couple. Is it information literacy? Is it solving problems? Is it teamwork? Is it giving presentations, and talk about and provide evidence for how they have grown in that particular area? And that also has been super useful for the students and for us. It's great data.
Awesome. I do have one more question. Sorry, Josh. We'll let you start soon. So I think we're moving to Josh soon. So as you've worked with faculty and institutions across the country, Chris, what are some of the most significant barriers that you've seen, and how have you seen institutions overcome those barriers to
Uh,
implementing a project-based learning culture?
that's a great question. I think the barriers are different depending on your institutional context, of course. So one of the key barriers at many institutions is they have their students for the time they are in the classroom. They can't rely on the students to be able to get together or even perhaps do much work outside of the classroom. And so in those places, I'm frequently asked, well, how can they possibly do a project? And the answer typically is, well, you organize the class time so they're doing the project in the class time. And that seems to work pretty well, but it requires a major rethink by faculty. And once they do that, they're able to implement that, but it also then, you have to adjust the scale of the project. So that's one of the things that is frequently a barrier or is seen as a barrier by people. Um, the other often is I can't put a project in my class. It's already too full. We barely cover all the material as it is. And so I think in that instance, it's a matter of thinking how the project can help students learn the content, that it doesn't have to be you teach the content first and then you do a project, but how does the project itself help the students learn the content that you wanted them to learn? And again, that requires kind of a major rethink by faculty, but it's definitely possible. So those are two of the big things that I have seen. Okay, so this portion is all about helping you either convince yourself or giving you some ammunition to help convince others that project-based learning is something that you might be willing to try. And this is um, research that we have done using our 50 plus years of having delivered project-based learning to our students. So we've done alumni surveys, and we've done a couple of them. And what you're going to see are the results of our most recent one, where we got over 2,000 alumni to respond. And we asked them how they thought their project work while they were here as undergraduates impacted their lives and careers post graduation. And you can see in the big orange circles that there's some big numbers there. 95% felt project work helped them take responsibility for their own learning. 84% contributed to being able to function in the real world. 94% said the projects enhanced their ability to develop their ideas. So that's pretty amazing. We weren't surprised, but rather gratified to see that, in fact, this curriculum we built to help them be better professionals seemed to be doing just that. And I have an amazing research evaluation person in my team who was able to do the fancy stats on the data we got out of the survey, and was able to tease out that there are three things that seem to amplify the impact of the projects. And one is that each project helps develop skills that improve learning after those skills are developed. The second is that each project adds to the student's sense of self-efficacy. And the third is that, based on the first two, that if you have more than one project, they're additive. So next slide, I'll unpack those amplifiers just a bit. So the skills to improve future learning. One of the things that students learn in team-based projects particularly are these 5 skills that you see on the slide. And you'll see most of them are about being able to collaborate. And once students have gained some facility with these things, it makes their subsequent learning experiences, particularly in projects, but not just projects, easier. And so they have a better growth mindset and are able to learn subsequent material more easily. Next slide. Second amplifier, this increased self-efficacy. So project-based learning helps develop the professional skills, as discussed, communication, critical thinking. But when they're doing work that feels real and meaningful, and like it might be something they're asked to do outside of a classroom, they also see themselves as capable professionals. And that is a big boost in their self-efficacy. So 79% of how prepared alumni are for their current career that they attributed to professional skills is explained by gains in self-efficacy. Now, the math you have to do that is fancy, but we can break that down further. So some of that is based on who the student is walking in the door. But then the 3 skills in the blue boxes below influence of identity are other things that contribute to that sense of self-efficacy. Their gains in information use, communication, and teamwork skills are all really important for that. And finally, amplifier 3, more than one high quality project is better. Having more than one is better than one. Having 3 is better than 2. And the benefits are both content mastery, skills development, and this long-term career and personal success. And we learned in particular that that project experience in the first year helps subsequent projects have even more of an impact, and that project in the first year that's interdisciplinary amplifies how much working on interdisciplinary teams subsequent to that impacts their downstream careers. And all of this is true even if that first year project experience wasn't one that the student found particularly enjoyable or satisfying. So even the ones that students say weren't particularly great can be really powerful. And so I'll stop there and hope that that helps you see some of the power of project-based learning, and I'll turn it over to Josh.
All right. Well, thank you. And I think to Dr. Obi's point, I think all of you that have been listening are probably thoroughly convinced at this point that you need to do more project-based learning on your campus. And so as she alluded to in one of her slides, how then do you get started and how do you do it? And that's really where Ripen steps in, is we have both a platform, a marketplace, and a team that really supports our partners to be able to scale up the project-based learning that they are doing. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the basics of that here today, and then we'll wrap with some time to do some additional questions. Mara already alluded to this. She spoke about the problem of underemployment, the persistence of underemployment. That is really what Ripen's mission is all about, is eliminating underemployment and finding scalable and flexible ways to do that. The internship data that she shared at the top is indicative of the problem, that there needs to be multiple approaches to getting experiential learning into students' hands. So the project-based format is a very scalable, very flexible way to do that, and that is squarely where Ripen sits. I'd like to start with a slide that's incredibly busy by design here, just to give you a sense for the scale at which we are doing this work. So in addition to all the logos that you see on the screen, some of the big numbers on the left, we are, in the 10 years that we've been doing this now, approaching 300,000 individual learner experiences that we have facilitated on the Ripen platform. We've worked with hundreds of academic partners, thousands of faculty, to help them do this in their courses. And there's other models increasingly that we are also supporting in addition to just the embedded model where we work with faculty, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. One of the really where Ripen started is one of the barriers to being able to do this work and to being able to scale this work is access to projects, to companies, and being able to then bring high quality projects into a class to allow students to practice what they're learning and to gain all the benefits that Dr. Wobbe alluded to. So what we've done over the years is we've built a very robust employer marketplace. And so that 44,000 that you see, that's the current size of our marketplace, the number of employers on the Ripen platform who are bringing those projects and looking to partner with educators and their students and provide these authentic experiences. So that's a real key part of what we do is provide net new companies and net new projects to help make these experiences come to life for learners. So that marketplace, as I just spoke about, that is a real central part of what we do. Not only bringing them to the table, but then providing the support to make sure that the matches are a good fit for what an educator is looking for, the kinds of skills they're looking for a learner to develop. Our team really does a lot of pre-vetting of companies, work very closely with our educators to help make sure that we are bringing them projects that are going to help them to achieve the learning objectives that they have and allow their learners to develop the skills they're looking for them to apply. Once those projects are matched, the Ripen platform is also one with which an educator can oversee what students are doing. I'll show you an example of what a dashboard looks like here in a moment. But if you have multiple teams doing projects, how do you keep tabs on that? How do you make sure that they are getting the support that they need through the process and that they're staying on track? We've built a lot of tools to do just that. Ripen really is the source of truth where the work that students are doing, the communication that they're having is all accessible to an educator, as well as giving them structure with which they can work through their projects. And I'll talk more about that and show you what that looks like. And then finally, tools to be able to actually measure what's happening. What impacts are we seeing? Some of the kinds of things that Dr. Wobbe spoke about, I'll share some data here from some of our partners in a moment. But being able to collect feedback throughout the process, be able to make sure that you can do pulse checks, that learners are staying on track, and then do all of that very systematically across all the different kinds of courses and programs that an institution is running so that you can ascertain the overall impact of what this project-based work is representing on your campus. I alluded to the fact that we have a lot of different use cases that we're seeing here at Ripen. On the far left, historically, the bulk of what we've done have been embedding these kinds of courses into the curriculum, working with faculty, exactly as Dr. Wobbe described, to help them to frame out what kinds of projects are going to be a good fit for them, to be able to make a very attractive employer-facing page on our platform, and then ultimately help them find those projects that will fit into their class. But that is not the only model that our partners are employing in 2025. And quite frankly, depending on where you're starting from and the open-mindedness of your faculty to doing this, finding alternative ways to also do project-based learning outside of the course can be really important to helping scale more quickly. And so some of the examples of those that we've seen are layering them in with certificates, whether those be certificate or micro-credential programs that are offered by an institution. We have partners that are using industry certifications like a Google certificate outside of the curriculum and then offering a project-based experience in follow-up to having completed that. That's a really compelling and powerful way to give students something that is very resume worthy when they are done. The notion of an academic internship or a project-based internship that's for credit is one that most all institutions have some kind of vehicle in the curriculum for awarding credit for an internship and taking that vehicle and using it to provide more project-based internship opportunities very intentionally is something that several of our partners are doing. And then there's a couple of different co-curricular examples that we're seeing. The challenge with co-curricular is always what motivates a student to do it, and if they begin, what motivates them to finish it. But we have a few different models where we have partners that are offering co-curricular project-based experiences where they're really establishing minimum criteria for a learner to be able to participate so that they are ensuring that they're highly motivated. And one of the I think really neat examples of that is working with student clubs. We have a couple of partners where, and in both of these cases, the career services has been sort of the connective tissue where a student club is interested in doing a real project that is practicing the things that that are relevant to their club, and they've approached a career center and said, "Can you help us?" And they have then used Ripen to find those projects. And one really, I think, interesting element of those applications that we've seen is they've then introduced those students to an alumni mentor who can work with them as a subject matter expert. That's the real advantage to doing this in the curriculum is your faculty member is the SME. But in these cases where it's outside of the curriculum, how do you solve for that? An alumni mentor is a really cool way that we've seen that happen with student clubs.
So,
What
Josh,
is-
we do have a question in the chat that
Sure.
builds off that slide and what you were just talking about. And working with those other campus offices that manage project-based learning, such as career development or other offices, can you dig a little bit more into what that relationship is like typically, and how is the interaction usually structured and managed?
Yeah, good question. There's all different models for what that looks like in practice is the short answer. Career services is often a really key, again, sort of connective tissue to delivering these kinds of experiences. Either they, are already teaching career development classes that might be able to incorporate a project-based component as part of what they're doing, and or they work with academic departments to facilitate internships. And so doing that in a project-based format is a natural extension of that. So there's a lot of different, in practice examples of how different units on campus contribute. And it really just depends on, how are things structured on your campus for how might we, how might we set something up and properly support it. And there's also a lot of opportunity for Ripen to help fill in gaps, to be able to provide support where the resources do not exist, to really, properly resource matching with projects and standing up these kinds of courses. So that's also an opportunity to really act as a force multiplier for the human resources that you have to be able to scale these kinds of things up. So I'll just very briefly say that what you're looking at on the screen here is what this looks like in practice. This is two examples of what the Ripen platform looks like. Each of these colorful tiles that you can see, they're rather small on your screen, but those are individual courses, co-curricular programs, project-based internships, any of those examples I just shared. Each of those tiles represents one of those. And that is where we are working with that faculty member or that program coordinator, whoever the case may be, to frame out what kinds of projects they're looking for, how much time students are going to spend in them, are they going to work in groups or individually, all of those important elements. And that is what then goes out to the marketplace to attract employers. So that's what each of those tiles are. Just to kind of show you those two sides of the marketplace, on the lower left is what that would look like to an employer. So again, I realize it's small, but each of those little icons that you see are individual courses that are actively matching. Those would be, if I clicked into it, the content that's behind those tiles on the previous slide. And then in the top right, what you're seeing is the project side of the marketplace. We have several thousand projects available at any one time. Again, our team is really supporting our partners to be shopping that on their behalf and pre-vetting projects as potential good fits. But it's a two-sided marketplace at its core, where you have courses on one side, courses and programs, and then projects on the other. And we're providing a lot of tools and support to help find those good fit matches. Once that matching is done, I alluded to this before, this is a view of what one of those dashboards looks like, where as you may have multiple teams doing projects, the columns that you see here can represent milestones. different interim deliverables. They can also represent perhaps data collection points, feedback surveys, whether they be pulse check kinds of surveys or more pre-assessment and post-assessment. But this gives a dashboard view of what's going on in all of these different projects. Again, it's a little bit small, but you can see perhaps a column that says flags. That is where we have a lot of automation built in to flag something for an educator as worthy of their attention. If something has missed a deadline, a milestone was not completed on time, it will alert the educator to go take a look. So this is sort of a macro view of what's going on within a course or a program that can then drill down on a very micro level into an individual team. What are their individual, accomplishments as they are checking off milestones, the deliverables they're producing. You can see here that it shows 7 tasks complete, 3 overdue. If this was a live demo and I clicked into that, I could go into any specific task and see exactly what the team did, what they reported having done. I can see all the communication they're having. Perhaps I want them to log their hours. There's a work log feature there. So there's both a macro dashboard view of what does this look like, but then also the ability to get really granular and be able to see what any individual or any individual team is doing at any point in their project. And then just a couple of other things to wrap us out that I think are really important. We integrate with the Lightcast Open Skills Taxonomy, and that does a couple of things. That helps when an educator is framing one of these experiences out to indicate which skills they're looking for learners to apply. On the project side, companies also select skills when they're building out a project, and that helps to facilitate and add efficiencies to the matching process. As you can imagine, we're comparing skills on both sides. But I think most importantly, when a student finishes their project on Ripen, they are receiving feedback from the industry partner they work with. They're getting written feedback, but also endorsements of their skills. And so what that then amounts to is employer verified skills against an industry standard taxonomy, the Lightcast taxonomy. And I'll just show you quickly, this is going to scroll a little bit, but you can see the call out of what the skills are that this particular student has had endorsed by the employers that she's worked with. This is an example of a student that did multiple projects. So they've had several skills that were endorsed 6 times. And this is what they are able to go put on their LinkedIn profile to really amplify their resume and improve their employability is this kind of feedback and these endorsed skills. And the last thing I'll finish with, I've alluded to this a few different times, but there's a lot of opportunity to be measuring impact. We have built-in survey tools to be able to ask learners and employers the kinds of questions that are important to the outcomes you're looking for. Depending on what kinds of experiences we are delivering, those outcomes might be career exploratory, they might be career clarity, they might be confidence, or they might be employment. So this is an example of the former, where this is a program we do with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and this is some interesting data. This one is really focused around career awareness and career preparation. And so the data is speaking to the extent to which these learners are finding or are reporting those outcomes, feeling more prepared for the workforce, more informed about the kinds of careers they can explore. So this is a program really oriented around career awareness and preparation. And this is the data that we're able to collect that shows the impact of those on those things. On the other hand, we have programs that are very employment focused. So this actually is data that comes from a program we do in Canada that is funded by the federal government, where students are actually paid a stipend. So I didn't even mention that, but we also support a lot of paid sort of micro internship programs. This is one where it is fully subsidized by the government for students to do a $1,400 project with a small business. And so what the government is really interested in then are employment outcomes in this project. And the biggest one here on the left-hand side is the data where we're asking students longitudinally 6 months after they do their project to tell us what impact having done that project had on their employment outcomes. And what this is saying is that 24% received a direct employment outcome. They got a job offer from the company they did a project with. 26% are reporting an indirect outcome. So they got a job offer from another company, but leveraging the project opportunity that they had to help them get that opportunity. And then 25% got multiple job offers. They got both an offer from the company they did a project with, but also another company. So in total, 76% report a direct employment outcome, a direct or indirect employment outcome. This is very powerful data. This has been key to us growing the size of this program with the federal government of Canada to more than 30,000 learners that we've put through this program, and that continues to be ongoing. So I think these two slides are really meant to be indicative of the kinds of outcomes that can be achieved by doing project-based learning in whatever form it takes. And then also our ability to help you collect and report on that kind of data very systematically in delivering these programs. So that is where I'll stop. And Mara, turn it back to you to wrap us up with a few questions.
Awesome. We've got just a couple minutes left. I do want to kind of add to Josh's last comment talking about the employability. Employment isn't the final outcome we're looking for. We're looking for what does employment lead to in an individual's life. It leads to the ability for them to support themselves and their families, to contribute to their communities, to really be more engaged because they're able to take care of those important things at home that they need to take care of first and primarily. And so that's why we speak about employment, and more largely because it's able to allow our individuals to participate more fully in the community and society around them. So I do have a couple more questions that we want to finish out with. This one is probably best for Chris, Dr. Wobbe. What strategies have you seen that works that balance that faculty autonomy, the faculty academic freedom with the institution-wide scaling of project-based learning? What have you seen work, and how have folks been able, or institutions been able to navigate that?
Well, I think because of the issues of academic freedom, not requiring faculty to do project-based learning is key, and making it be possible and supporting it if they want to do it and if it works for their classes. There are going to be some classes where this is going to be harder to implement anyway. But one of the things, I don't know if I mentioned, but more than 70% of our faculty now use projects inside their classes. So that's been an accretion over time, but nobody's asked to put them in their classes. So I think once they see the benefits, they become more likely to do it. And then recruiting those that want to. We know that all projects is also not good. Students can get burned out on projects. So having some courses where they're doing lots of good, high quality active learning, but not necessarily big, all-encompassing projects is also really valuable. So I think you need both, and allowing faculty to sort of decide what works best for their students and their content material works best.
Awesome. And then I think we have time for one more question, and this one's probably for Josh. How can employer partnerships be structured to serve student learning? It's actually probably both Chris and Josh. How can employer partnerships be structured to serve student learning?
Why don't you take that one first, Dr. Wobbe?
I think the most important thing is the conversation that happens between the employer and the instructor. So, I mean, the key thing, if the students are doing it for credit and in a course, they need to be meeting the course learning objectives and helping the employer understand that that comes first, and then figuring out how they can do something that will satisfy the employer and satisfy what they're being required to do for that academic credit before the students begin is super important. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And that's really what, our objectives are and what we built the platform to do. So the experience page that we create is meant to very clearly articulate those requirements, even those expectations for how often do you need to meet with students, those kinds of basics about how does a company show up. The matching process then is meant to facilitate confirming those things. There can even be, we have many of our programs that have required terms and conditions that an employer or partner will have to agree to for further codifying those things. That can all happen on the Ripen platform. So it's about being eyes wide open, setting very clear expectations, and then confirming and codifying them through the process. That sets things up for success.
Wonderful. Awesome. So we've hit time. We have a ton more questions, but we won't be able to get to those today. So we want to be able to wrap up and be respectful of everyone's time. If you want to learn more about Ripen or WPI and the work that they do, feel free to scan either of those QR codes. We will share those PowerPoints with everybody. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions as well through those QR codes that we can answer. Thank you everyone who were able to attend today. This was a great discussion, really looking forward to being able to continue it. And so take care and thank you for attending.